What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Beers and Gears. In today's episode, we'll be taking old crappy fender flares and turning them into this. Oh my god, they're beautiful. Now, I have a 1996 Jeep Cherokee, but if you have an 84 to 96, these will pertain to you. So, I decided to bedline my Jeep in a previous video, and in order to do so, I took the fender flares off the Jeep so I could get in behind them. Now keep in mind these fender flares have been on my Jeep for 22 years, so it was no surprise when I went to take them off, all the studs broke on the retainers. Well, luckily, if you do your homework and do some research, you do still sell these. These little retainers are $80 for the whole set for all 4 fender flares. So we're gonna prevent these new ones here that I got from rusting. And in order to do so, we're gonna paint them. So with the price of a new fender flare retainer in mind, we're gonna take precautionary steps in keeping these from ending up like this. So these fender flare retainers just sit in behind the flare like that, and then these studs come through your wheel well and a little nut goes on the backside. But with it being inside the flare like that, it collects dirt and road salt in there, and then they end up rotting out. So because of that, we're going to take a precautionary measure to keep the new ones looking new and keep them from rusting out. Now you're going to start by taking a little masking tape and tape off each one of the studs. That way when you paint them, you don't get paint all over your studs. Now, do yourself a favor and take and lay all your fender flare retainers out and make sure that you have all the ones for the left and all the ones for the right. These are marked, but there's a good chance that after we paint these, you won't be able to see this. So you want to make sure beforehand that you have everything you need. Our next step, you want to take something like a Scotch-Brite pad. It doesn't have to be real abrasive. We're just scuffing the surface of this up so we get rid of all the shininess, so it has something to stick to. You want to get it good and dull. You can see where it was sanded. Paint will stick to that. Paint won't stick to the shiny stuff. So now that we have all these sanded, we're going to take a little bit of wax and grease remover and just wipe these off. One thing to keep in mind is that when you're working with bare metal, you want to apply something like a self-etching primer before you apply any kind of paint. Do this, I'm just going to apply 2 thin even coats to both sides of these retainers. Then after you get done with your primer, read your instructions on your paint, because you should be able to apply it while the primer is still wet. So if that's the case, apply your primer, let it dry maybe a minute or 2, and then go ahead and start painting. Now that we applied 2 thin coats of primer, we're going to apply 2 thin coats of paint. So we got everything primed and painted. The next thing you want to do while the paint is still wet is go ahead and pull the tape off all the studs that you put on your retainers. Now we're going to start on these fender flares, but before I start on this, unfortunately it's too cold outside to have the doors open. So before I start on these, I'm going to step outside for some air. Okay, so if you haven't already, you're going to take the old fender flare retainers out of your fender flares, and they just pop right out. So you can see how rusty the old ones were. That wouldn't be such a problem, but the main problem was the studs broke on a lot of the fender flare retainers. That's why I had to replace them. Now before you put any kind of paint on these, make sure you clean them thoroughly. I'm going to use wax and grease remover. You can use dish detergent. Dish soap is good because it takes grease out. So anything that's greasy or anything that might have seeped down into the plastic, you want to get out of it, because once you apply paint to this, you don't want to get fish eyes. And anything oily like that will cause fish eyes. Now after you got your fender flare all good and clean it again, because I guarantee the biggest letdown besides premature ejaculation is a piss poor paint job that could have been prevented. Whenever we get to paint these, we want to use like a trim, and this is called trim and bumper paint. So anything that's for trim or anything that's for plastic, something like that, this has flex additive in it. So basically what that means is if it's going on plastic, something that's going to flex, if you brush up against it or it would move or something, the paint's not going to crack whenever you apply the right stuff to it. Oddly enough, it's got a picture of a Cherokee on it. Look at that. Also works for other vehicles besides Cherokees. Now we don't want to do a real thick coat of this stuff on, because if you get it too thick, it might have a tendency to flake off. So we're just going to do real thin coats. Maybe 2-3 coats, whatever it takes to cover it. And that should be good enough. Basically it's just about the coverage. You just want to get it covered, because we're not changing the color of it. We just want to darken them up some more, so they're not so faded. Real quick, light coat, and then we'll go back over it with a second coat to cover everything we missed. Now after they're all dry and we got them all painted, they should turn out something like this. Looks like a brand new one. Now, like I said before, keep in mind these are 22-year-old fender flares, but if you did it right and followed this video step by step, you should come out with something like this. And they damn near look brand new. So this might be a healthy alternative to buying $400 fender flares, as opposed to just repainting your old ones and taking a little time and making them look decent. Just wanted to do one last quick comparison here. So these are the new fender flare retainers, old fender flare retainers, old fender flares, new paint job. Old fender flares. No paint job. One last quick tip. While you have your fender liners out of your wheel wells, take your time and clean them up good, because you don't want to be putting old crappy fender liners back in when your fender flares look that good. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for part 2. And if you're wondering about decals or t-shirts, get a hold of me. I'll leave my contact info in the description below for my email. Thank you.